Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Hello, and welcome everybody to this next episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Hi, Jay.
How's it going, Sarah? Miss you.
Oh, we miss you too. By the way, I have to say, it doesn't get any easier saying the intro. I have to really work through my words. I do not want a Freudian slip on this.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, we miss you too. You only brought a carry-on, right?
I only travel with carry-on.
I know. It's such a
I never
pain
check bags.
because you can't bring us back all the goodies. I thought about that as I'm getting ready for my trip. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to ship home a bunch of stuff for you guys.
Yeah, it's not worth the headache.
No. What's your favorite thing that you've eaten in Sicily so far?
Well, let's see. Today, we were on a food tour, and I didn't try it, but I thought it was a little interesting. Is they did grilled intestines. That was
You
unique.
didn't try it. You're so
I
brave.
I know. I just didn't feel like I didn't want to be getting sick
You don't want to
before our
risk it.
podcast. But I did. I tried a really fun arancina, however you pronounce it here. Everyone pronounces it differently. I really
Hmm.
enjoyed it, like that, like the basically the rice ball type of thing. I
Yeah.
think it's super yummy.
That's fun. Well,
Yep,
did you take a picture at least of the intestine?
I did, and I will send
Okay.
it to you.
Please send it to us. Like of all the things, he's so bad about sending us pictures, you guys.
I
But
am.
now I'm requesting the grossest one of the bunch. Although I still feel like the grossest one was when you went to Thailand and you ate grasshoppers or whatever it was.
Yep, it was. I think it was
Disgusting.
scorpions.
Ugh. Ugh. Well, speaking of gross things, we want to talk about the CRM swamp
My God,
today.
good,
I did
good
not plan that
segue.
segue. It just
That was
happened
cute.
naturally. Thank you to you. But we do want to talk about how your CRM isn't the problem, your system is. And this one's an interesting one for a lot of people, but you and I talked about this question as we were getting ready for this podcast, which was if your CRM, which is a customer database in all respects, we talk about not using a lot of jargon here. Um, I do find that word actually has been misunderstood, but CRM is wherever you're storing your customers, your customer management resource center, whatever it is, spreadsheet, no judgment, little judgment. But if your CRM disappeared tomorrow, would your business get better or worse? Would it get easier or harder? And I think that question alone is kind of like, I even thought about that, like reflecting on that question, because you and I have gone through and even had a couple of conversations. So we run on HubSpot for our CRM, and we've tried a bunch. Like we're pretty tool agnostic for the most part when it comes to just about any tool. There are some we prefer, some have better reputations, but when it comes to CRMs, HubSpot's a pretty great tool. And at one point, I'm like, how are we managing this? This was several years ago as we really swapped from SharpSpring into HubSpot. And I'm like, okay, so who's managing this and what's happening with this? And it brought up a whole nother set of questions as we were getting ready to migrate. And I don't know, Jay, like if you think about how many times even just StringCan has migrated CRMs, I mean, how many are we talking in like 16 years?
I can remember at least four. It's really embarrassing to admit this is in that first probably 6 months when I launched the company in 2010, I actually did use a spreadsheet. So embarrassed to admit that now.
You know what
But
though? I wouldn't be embarrassed about that.
well, I mean, I had so much going on. I was wearing every possible hat as a typical entrepreneur launching a new company. And the last thing I had the capacity mentally, physically, emotionally, financially for was figuring out which CRM to go with. But I can recall because my last company, we used Pipedrive. I'm a pretty big fan of that from a sales CRM perspective. And the company before that I used Salesforce. So I knew those two systems very well. So we at least tried those two systems in early days of StringCan. Then we switched to I think then it was SharpSpring, and then HubSpot. And HubSpot's been our platform now probably for what 6+
Well,
years, maybe
actually,
at
weren't
least.
we in HubSpot, then SharpSpring, then HubSpot?
We did one version of HubSpot's module before SharpSpring, um, and then we switched to SharpSpring, and then we went back to HubSpot. But again, it's the whole shiny object. And again, I definitely have empathy when we chat with our clients about this stuff because we ourselves did the exact same mistakes that our clients did, and it's like we at least we are aware that we could say, hey, you're not alone. We've gone through it also.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a podcast talking about our perfection because that's not going to happen in this one. Sorry. But it does, this one is not dissimilar to a lot of other operational activities that are database driven, including, I'd even say, like project management tools and systems. I think what's interesting, though, is like even in my own reflection, because I wasn't really in the marketing seat as heavily as I am now, I'm a lot more operational. And partly that was just you and I had kind of made that agreement. But even when we went from one project management system to the next, there was a lot of best practices put in place that I find don't happen with CRMs, but I don't think that they're that dissimilar enough that the CRM should be treated as like this set it and forget it type of tool. Like almost like what's the version of import and let it die? That's sort of the set it
Yep.
and forget it mentality. And so if I could go back and do it again with the mindset I had from a project management perspective. So I think like first of all, when I look back on our conversations, where we didn't do the best job is picking an owner. Like someone says, this tool is my responsibility. It is my job to make sure it functions well. It's got the right data. It's being groomed and managed. It's almost like, and it is in some cases, a living thing. And I know you did, but then as we added more stuff, like I have a couple of thoughts, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on why is it so hard or why is it not a priority to choose an owner for your CRM?
Well, I think if I can add some context first, and then I'll address that because I think my head is spinning now with a lot of reflection, self-reflection on where I've made some mistakes. But it's funny is, first of all, I think the interesting idea around this is where does all these problems first start before we get into that owner conversation? Because I reflect on all of our clients that we worked with and helped them onboard a CRM. And again, to your point, we are agnostic, but HubSpot typically is one that a lot of our clients find a lot of value in. So I'm going to focus on that one for a second. But typically, it's like one of two things happen. Either the some leadership member is saying, I need access to data to better understand how to predict what our revenue, flow is going to look like. And without having a solid CRM in place, then you're basically working off of spreadsheets and just praying and hoping that people are entering the data correctly. And the second one that I think I least like is more of a kind of a passive aggressive element to it where some leadership team members are worried that their salespeople are just not performing and they want to have some kind of tool to be able to better monitor what's going on there. So I wanted to share those two items first because I think it might help explain some of my answers to your questions, not only this first one, but any other ones we talk about on this episode. But back to your question on the owner side, I think it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And that's the problem is that, if you could have like if an executive, for example, back to my 2 points before, if one of the ones are communicating a frustration point they have of not having visibility into, predictable success, which again is a big part of the CRM, and then also ensuring that the various different team members that are using it are being consistent in how they're doing outreach and handling, nurturing lead opportunities. if the owner is not intimately involved in the marketing and or sales aspects of the CRM, that owners I think is going to feel very disconnected because all they're going to do is give a strategic direction on what they want to see the output and the value of the CRM being, but they're not the actual ones using it and not really going to understand what is possible or not. And so I think what ends up happening is you someone at the company just sees just shiny objects, all these features, bells and whistles of all these various different CRMs. At the end of the day, from my experience, I've worked in probably at least, I don't know, 7 or 8 pretty popular CRMs over the years. They all fundamentally work pretty much the same. And so I think back to your point, it's like not having an owner, I think, is part of the problem. Again, like back to your project management example, when we switched to ClickUp from was it Jira? Yeah,
Hmm.
Jira. I think we did a really good job at being like, what do we want the system to do for us? Versus what will the system do? So we focus on our needs and our scope and our requirements first, and then we basically chose the platform that would most meet those needs, and we focused on that being how we're going to onboard the tool. And for some reason, when it comes to a CRM, it's like someone, leadership, salesperson, or head of marketing is like, I'll be the owner. We need this stuff because our leadership's asking for it. Let's go ahead and just go with this one platform. And then they just rely on hopefully the onboarding of the agency or that platform on how to do all of this stuff. And I think the lack of the owner, you have basically, it's almost like, well, I guess bad example now with driverless cars, but I was going to use that as an analogy where I'm like, basically it's almost like, you getting into a car and there's no driver. So maybe yeah, you use a plane because I don't believe today. Besides, I mean, the military, they have commercial planes being driven by a robot, at least to my knowledge, and I'm sure I'm probably wrong. But I think that would be a little scary if you have 200 plus people on a flying tube, and there is no pilot. That would be a little scary. And I just back to your point. I'm kind of going a lot of details here, but I think you're right. I don't understand why this is a huge problem, but I think without an owner, you're just going to basically just you're going to be going through the motions, and it's going to become a huge swamp.
Yeah, and we affectionately refer to it as the CRM swamp because it's just so prevalent. Like if you're listening to this and don't feel ashamed because it's just so common. And part of it is it happens that there usually isn't an owner. It's a tool that everyone's like, "Yep, I agree to this," and we use it. Similar-ish to a project management tool, unless you have a really dedicated like project manager or an operations person who is keeping up the hygiene and updating and all of that stuff. Even that system gets really ugly really fast. Same thing with your internal document system, if that's Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever. Any one of those major tools is a complete disaster, a dumpster fire, a swamp, if there isn't someone saying, I need to keep this up. It's just like a house is a living thing too, that if you don't keep it up, it's going to fall apart and it's just going to be so much harder to maintain and pick up and clean up. And when that just happens over and over again with, different ownership groups like tenured employees leaving or, you've got turnover, it just keeps changing hands, but no one's given really the space to go, can we pause, reevaluate? Is this still a good tool? And how is this going to help us grow? Like, is this still the right tool? And it is a lot of work. But what we're finding now is this is really biting people in the butt because the
Hmm.
ones that are like, hey, it's not just a tool, or I should say, like data hygiene, but as you've all heard, no doubt from us, hopefully, at least at a minimum, AI is not going to be your friend if you don't have good data. And the best case for organizations to use AI to their advantage is to create a safe place for AI to run. And that's inside your own organizational system. Once you've got security and all that in place, using your own internal LLMs at some point is going to become the norm. And if you find yourself filling that internal LLM with a bunch of garbage and you're getting out total crap data, that's no one's fault but your own for not taking just a pause and reevaluating this system because it's like anything else, like a closet that has just become overrun. You don't know what's in it anymore, and you're like, whatever, I'll just get to it one of these days. I'll do a spring clean, but you put it off because it feels like so much work. This is the same thing. It's not going to get any better the longer you put it off. And the problem is that also becomes very expensive, as we've seen, where clients have had some turnover in terms of leadership and no one really had a moment to pause and breathe and look at the system. And then all of a sudden, their bill has doubled because they're paying for contacts that aren't even being nurtured, or frankly, even they're probably not even relevant any longer. And so I think because now what you've created is a lack of trust in the system, which is probably, and I don't know, Jay, in your sales experience, if that is something that is just sort of known, or does that become something that's talked about and it's part of the sales culture then too?
Well, I think again, I'm just trying to reflect a little bit because I we had a client, I think it was in 2021, so about a year after COVID stuff. That as you were talking just now, I started thinking about them. You know, uh, that client, when we started talking them back to your first question about the owner side, and I'll address your comment here in a second. There wasn't really an owner of the CRM, and they had, I think, I don't know, 11 or 12 different sales reps. And the minute I heard they didn't have an owner, and they had that many people, I knew this was going to be a complete mess. And I just think, in that client situation, back to your comment just now, they had some aggressive revenue goals, and they were moving so fast. And end of the day, the leadership team didn't really care about the data in theory being clean or not, because all they cared about was getting deals closed and hitting their aggressive revenue quarterly revenue goals. So I think, again, if you have no owner, and you have a very sales motivated organization culture, and no one's doing any kind of reflection and looking back about what's working, what's not. If every day that goes by that you don't have an owner and hygiene and a consistent process procedure that everyone's following, the same roadmap, again, that compounding effect, it's a disaster. And so when I was just thinking about what you were just talking with that client, literally every rep they had was using the system differently. Some were logging in once a week on Fridays and just trying to remember all the things about the 30 to 50 people they spoke to. And obviously that was complete garbage. Some people never logged in at all. Some people logged in and were doing everything manually. It was taking them forever, and they weren't using the templates. So I just think it's like if you don't have a strategic way of how you're going to be onboarding and leveraging the system and knowing the kind of analytics you want to come back out of it, I don't think that people should be surprised that this is a mess. And sadly, I just think that the nature of a lot of these CRM systems, they're so bloated. They have so many shiny objects. I think a lot of people that don't really fully understand it go in there and just start trying all these things, and it becomes a mess. Like for example, like one of the clients that we had, as I think you were alluding to, they imported contacts, and in their defense, it's a very small little checkbox in HubSpot. They didn't check off the don't import duplicates, and they imported all of them as duplicates and ended up with, I don't know, was it 8,000 or 9,000 additional marketing contacts? And of course, their renewal is coming up, and they thought they only had 25,000 marketing contacts, and they actually had, I don't know, was it 45 or 50,000, which obviously significantly increased their bill, to your point. So sadly, I'm not getting overly surprised when we're seeing this. But I guess the good news for us is for the, I don't know, hundreds of businesses that we've supported over the last, 16 years, we have consistently seen the same kind of challenges and obstacles come up over and over again, which I think again this episode I think of this of our podcast, I think touching on some of these things, hopefully those that are listening could recognize if they think they might have some of these challenges, and they could basically focus on just trying to solve some of these areas. Because I think if you could just solve a couple of these key things, the value of the data will be so much more beneficial to the business.
Hmm. And it is helpful to work backwards, because where we see the solutions come into place, they actually make the problem so much worse. And so, like to your point, I remember at least two of the transitions. I believe I can clearly remember coming out of SharpSpring and into HubSpot again and how much work we spent on that. Like, let's actually look at a last touch for all of those and see if like they're actually engaged or unengaged. And we cleaned out almost like 90% of our database
Huge.
because we were like, you know what? We don't want to start over with a bunch of nonsense. Let's make sure that this is useful. And, I know this is a silly analogy, but I did do that with my closet last year where I eliminated probably 70% of it. I was just ruthless, and actually my friends will call me to help them because I'm so ruthless. I just don't care. I don't have sunk cost bias. I just have moved too many times to care anymore. And so I'm like, just get rid of it. If you haven't worn it, you're questioning it, just call it a day. And it feels so good. But I think the FOMO of, well, what if there's this one golden ticket in my CRM? But you know what? You're going to have to find that golden ticket later. And you're actually going to have work to spend, nurturing and sending emails or however you're engaging this database. And you're going to have a really hard time knowing how to get that gold and the cream to the top if you've got a bunch of garbage you're trying to sift through, and it becomes unruly. And so, if you're going to move tools or systems, because now they're really more systems based than tools based, you owe it to yourself and your future leadership teams, your future CRM database owners to just be ruthless in what you're going to bring over. Like, is this super valuable? It's a really good time to reevaluate how you want your reports to look, what kinds of outcomes, what's your potential scalability in the next probably 3 years. I think the tool lifetimes too are kind of shortening, not because new and better tools are coming out, but you actually, the ease of moving between them is so much easier than it used to be. And so
Yeah.
if you're the kind of team who can be agile like that, you really bog yourself down when you don't lighten your load. It's almost like losing weight. You need to lose a little bit to make yourself faster, and that's kind of what I see happening in the database where it is a lot. Like we're not going to cut corners here and tell you guys this is super easy. But this is one area in which marketing teams more than most and agencies more than most other consultancies or partners are very good at helping you make these kinds of cleanups because the future of your marketing initiatives and like where you want your business to go is really dependent on, frankly, like the system that you have in place. And so we can be that ruthless closet cleaner person and say, listen, you haven't engaged with this whole list in like the last 15 years. Do you really want to bring them over? Like half these people are retired right now. So
Well,
I'd
I was
say
just
like
gonna
you brought that up about moving over. It's like don't bring it. Don't bring it with you.
Well, I mean, I love, obviously, me and you both are very similar on the whole minimalistic thing. What's that lady's name that was really good
Marie
about
Kondo.
thank you. But yet again, we both have a lot of friends and family members that, are more like on the hoarding side. And again, I reflect on that. We about a year ago had a client with, I don't know, 50 or 60,000 contacts in their database. And we had this really hard conversation with them. We actually were staying on the same platform, but they really wanted to start leveraging like an account-based marketing ABM type of approach, and they just didn't even know where to start. And And of course, nothing was in a segmented list. It was just basically 50,000 plus contacts sitting in one massive database. And it was a big, challenging conversation. And we did have, like, your analogy on the whole closet. I love it. I'm actually going to use that now because I think, it's really hard when you have, it's hard to find your favorite shirt because you have so much other stuff in there. And I think it causes a really hard process to make a decision. The less things you have, it's better quality over quantity. But
You
and
know,
then I
here's a
start,
phrase I've been using is that it gives you the illusion of options.
yep, I love it. So what I was going to say was in that client situation, we did come up with a really good process of how we could basically kind of like re-opt in those contacts. And yes, obviously that was a huge risk, and our client was very anxious. They're like, "What if people don't want to opt in?" I'm like, "Well, that means they probably don't want to hear from you anyway." But we came up with a really good strategy of how we're going to send out emails and offer value to ensure that people want to stay engaged. And yes, they had a lot of people that left our database. And the client didn't really overly care, like the cost savings on the contacts, because again, a lot of the CRMs, they do charge you based upon the number of contacts you have. Was a considerable savings for them per month. But in their minds, they were thinking about it the right way, where they were like, saving a couple $1,000s a month on the software. If we are eliminate the one potential contact that might be, $100,000+ opportunity, we don't want to rob the Peter to pay Paul kind of stuff. So again, that's what I think to your point, Sarah. I really appreciated that comment. This is where I think there is some value having an outside experienced, CRM partner to come in and do a proper audit and discuss the pros and cons and, the risks and benefits per se. Because again, I don't think hoarding is the right way to go here. But if you don't use the database, what's the point of hoarding them? But there is again a lot of like needles and haystacks, and there is a more effective way typically in how you could, clean up your database and have better hygiene. So that way, when you are sending out messages, maybe to a smaller quantity of people, you're getting a higher level of engagement, which then hopefully should translate into, higher revenue growth from engaging with those contacts.
Yeah, and I think where this tool is slightly different than project management systems, for example, is that the stakeholders are both simultaneously the executive leadership team who's looking at the dashboards and the actual users, which is typically a sales and or marketing team or customer service, depending on how large your organization is. And so getting like your change management process in a good place is really beneficial because you don't want to just decide on here's a shiny object that does all these really cool things and here's how we're going to roll it out without getting the actual input user's perspective. And that's where I think I see a lot of teams do one or the other. They do a change to please the leadership team. Here are some cool dashboards. Isn't this amazing? Without actually checking that the data going into the dashboards is feasible, it's easy to gather because let's face it, if it's not easy for teams to do, they're either not going to do it or they're not going to do it well. And it's just so beneficial to make sure that you get a solid buy off of like like a test group. I've heard some organizations who are doing, they're not even calling AI pilots anymore. They're doing like these very focused groups on solving specific problems. And so it's almost like an experiment at school where you get together and you're like, okay, here's our hypothesis and here's how we're going to solve it. Versus let's just kind of like play with it and see what happens. With tools like that, you need internal people to be your champions. And they're like, listen, I tested this. It's actually super easy. You have to have sort of that ground level support with someone saying, I've done this and you can too. And change management is probably one of the most underappreciated soft skills that an organization can really dive into when it comes to like your CRM movement or integration or just frankly getting one out of a spreadsheet.
Yeah, I think to your point, obviously this always works a little better if the sales organization part of this is smaller. I mean, if you have, I don't know, 30 to 50 salespeople, this gets much more challenging. You have to have an owner that's going to be the champion to basically train and teach everyone. But again, I think I reflect on, we have had some clients that had great onboarding using, HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever. And when I reflect on that a little bit, those that had very engaged salespeople, and you treated this as more of this is a tool that's going to help you make, hit your goals and make your commissions. And they saw the value of it versus being one more stupid thing they have to do just because some leadership team members requiring it. But if you get them involved earlier on, and basically they're all champions of the system, and they're seeing the benefit of all consistently using it the same way. I think that's where it's huge. And I think in my mind, like in that client situation, they had almost like a SLA, a service level agreement internally, where at a bare minimum, these are the 8 or 10 things that everyone's going to agree to. And we need to have that, that healthy conversation. If one person doesn't follow it, I think it becomes a problem. And again, I've seen organizations that are like, well, I have my A players who are, my 3 best salespeople, and I don't want to have to slow them down and make them do what everyone else has to do, so they don't have to do the CRM stuff because they're hitting their numbers. They're doing an amazing job. But then the problem is now you're expecting your B players, and maybe if you have C players in place, you want them to follow the rules, but they're like, but why isn't, Bob and Melissa, whoever else not following it? So I just think that the whole sales team and the marketing team, those that are involved in using the CRM, I think everyone needs to be on the same page, all driving in the same direction. You have an owner or champion involved that's kind of leading the charge because there are a lot of shiny objects that these platforms are constantly, launching. And someone I think needs to take the time to do the research to figure out if these new shiny objects are going to be a value to the organization and solving some important business need. And if everyone follows the platform the same way and they're going in daily and they're updating all the notes and they're putting in the right data so the reporting actually makes sense, I think the CRM tool can be extremely valuable. But if you have one single person not following the rules, that swamp situation becomes way too frequent coming up as far as issues go. So I just feel like the CRMs for any organization that's probably doing at least, I don't know, $5 million or more, you got to have a CRM in place if you have a sales goals you want to achieve. And if you have team members not following the same system the same way, I think you're going to have serious problems.
And I will say too, when we went from Jira to ClickUp, we did hire a consultant, like a firm that specializes in agency build outs in ClickUp. And I can tell you that was one of the best investments we made because they actually kept us from overcomplicating the system. They were like, this is how they did an awesome like intake. They assessed our needs, what kind of outcomes we want, what's our typical use. I, of course, had my 3 list of non-negotiables that any system needs to have, and I don't care what it looks like. And I think that was probably the number one thing that helped us drive that conversation to a very not shiny object driven place where it was like, as long as it accomplishes these 3 things with a level of ease that is achievable through this tool, I am so on board. And they were really helpful in making sure we didn't over engineer the system, which was really easy to do with ClickUp. It's a fabulous tool, but you can way over engineer. And actually, we're now deleting stuff that we had over engineered because we don't need it. And so that is an excellent hygiene opportunity too to consistently evaluate, am I getting the right data? Are my teams able to see and get the information that they need quickly? Can I do that if someone's not around urgently? And so I think your CRM, if you're feeling overwhelmed by it in general, it's really helpful to get an outside perspective to help you because you will miss some things inevitably because you're too close to them. We've seen it 100 times. We've done it ourselves. And so, from personal experience and from business experience, just seeing someone else's simplification to meet your outcomes in terms of the build of whatever the tool is in your CRM's case, it's so helpful. It takes such a weight off of you to have to figure it all out, to get all the stakeholders on board, to make sure that all the boxes are checked and everything's perfect. It's one of the things that I think is really truly most beneficial when it's outsourced.
Well, I think to your point, Sarah, that reminded me of a recent client situation we had where they have HubSpot in place. They have both the marketing and the sales side of HubSpot on the pro level. The marketing team came up with an amazing strategy as they were launching this new offering. They wanted to basically announce it to one segment of their client base that would most find this new kind of add-on offering of value. They spent weeks on building out the assets and landing pages and marketing copy and all these things. And then they were like, let's get this going. And they went to figure out who to send it to. And they produced the list in HubSpot and it had like 13 people. And they were expecting it to be like thousands. And, they contacted us thinking that they were doing something wrong around the list. And we immediately were like, well, let's first talk about how you're tagging the essentially the contacts for the list. And that question never was thought about till after the fact. And I think to your point, not that we want to be like, you should have called us before you started this process, because obviously they were beyond stressed out because they had a due date when they had to have this launch by, that sales was expecting this going. And then basically realized that the database was not set up to do it the way they want to do it. And then the question was, well, we have to get this out. Can we buy a database to import it in? And I'm like, wait, so let's slow down here for a second. So I think to your point, I think those that are listening to this, if you're, launching a new product or new market or whatever this new thing is that you wanted to, leverage your database. Obviously, that's one of the most effective ways to grow the business, is, reaching back out to past or current customers. I think it is really smart to your point, Sarah, that this is where I do find a lot of value on having an outside, experienced partner to come in and help you, because if you aren't asking the right questions up front, you might find that all that work you're going to do might not actually benefit you. And again, if there's certain, quantified goals that you want to have X number of meetings, if you don't have enough, contacts and enough of a good strategy on what the reach out is going to be, your chance of hitting those goals are just, you're setting yourself up to fail. And you don't think you have the right things in place. And I think asking the right questions up front and making sure you have the right systems in place, I think is critical around some of these opportunities. That's where I think the CRM can be hugely valuable if it's being used the right way.
Yeah, and don't be afraid of the opt out. Nobody, don't market if they don't want to be marketed to. It's
Yep, good point.
it's just I feel like there's too much fear around it, and what ends up is then you risk being marked as spam by someone who actually knows you because they're tired of hearing from you. So it's okay. Like, let them opt out. Let them,
Yep,
as Mel Robbins. I did never thought I'd be able to bring a Mel Robbins reference into this podcast, but here we go. Let them.
love it.
All right. Well, Jay, this was an awesome podcast. And I don't know if anyone else got the flashback of the old Swamp Thing TV show on Sci-Fi Channel, but I sure did. So hopefully your CRM does not remind you of Swamp Thing, but if it does, we're always happy to help and give you a no obligation conversation and tell you like how bad your swamp is. So you can reach out a podcast at stringcaninteractive.com. And Jay, ciao. Have a lovely
Uh,
rest of your day.
Buena Sarah. Appreciate it. Bye,
All
everyone.
right. Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.